Hello, Linda, Mrs. Baraka, and thank you so much to those who've just joined us, Shanae and Samaya. We love and appreciate you. And looks like Deborah Purcell called in from Maryland. So yes, it's sponsored by the Newark Public Library, but also some from Maryland who want to hear all about what you have to share. So thank you all. I think we can go ahead and jump in. Right, so, Lauren, I'm excited to introduce Yoli. Did you want to share anything before I do?
No, just welcome everyone to the Newark Public Library. We're happy and just like thrilled to have Dr. Yolanda Sealy-Ruiz here, who I have known for a very long time and who I consider a mentor, and who teaches me a lot about how to be a warrior and be loving at the same time. So we are lucky to have her here.
We so are. Fantastic. Thank you, Lauren. So I couldn't agree more. I asked Lauren that because I've been sitting, kind of chomping at the bit, waiting to not just read the beautiful collection, but also to have this conversation. And it's so unique from what we've done historically. For those who are not familiar, it's the Newark Public Library President's Coterie that is sponsoring this event. Lauren, or Dr. Wells, is the president of the Newark Public Library's Board of Trustees, and Linda Baraka and I co-chair this particular organization. Really, the goal is to expand not just the reach of the library, but this gem of an institution to be leveraged and used and enjoyed the way that it was intended to, and beyond. So we're super excited. Dr. Sealy-Ruiz, also affectionately known by those who love her as Yoli, and you can't help but love her. We're so very fortunate to have her on. I'm gonna share just a little bit. And it's interesting because the part that I'm gonna share is I'm preserving the magic of the book for our guest today, but I'll just share a little bit about her background and her history, because sometimes I think that when you're close to excellence, you take excellence for granted. When you're close to creativity, you take it for granted. And each person on this call that I see, some I know, some I don't, but I don't take any of you for granted, and I want to also just show respect here. So take a minute to hear Dr. Yolanda Sealy-Ruiz is an award-winning associate professor at Teachers College, Columbia University. Her research focuses on racial literacy in teacher education, Black girl literacies, and Black and Latinx male high school students. She's a sought-after speaker on issues of race, culturally responsive pedagogy, and diversity. Yoli works with K-12 and higher education school communities to increase their racial literacy knowledge and move toward more equitable school experiences for their Black and Latinx students. Sealy-Ruiz appeared in Spike Lee's Two Fists Up, We Gonna Be All Right, a documentary about the Black Lives Matter movement and the campus protests at Mizzou. Yolanda is also the editor of 3 books on education and numerous scholarly articles and essays. The one that I'm most excited about is this beautiful collection called Love from the Vortex. And I'm gonna let her, there it is, which is available. We'll have to tell you all that before we're done. I'll have her tell you all of that, because we already know some people have read it and some people haven't, but this conversation today is for everyone. So what I'm first gonna ask her to do is just share from her heart, share from her spirit, like what this is that we're discussing today. And then we're gonna take some time to have Yoli share some of her favorites from within the book. And then I have a few questions already lined up that people have sent me kind of in secret, because love seems to be this thing that we can't talk about, whether it's love, vulnerability, everything that comes with it. So I've got some questions lined up, but we want to hear from you as well, because this just is an opportunity for us to take our minds off of everything that we're constantly doing every day, doing and running and, responsible for, but this is for us and our spirits. So Yoli, I'm so pleased to turn it over to you.
Oh my goodness. I cry at the drop of a hat, and I feel very emotional right now. And sister, I just want to thank you. I want to thank the President's Circle. I want to thank Newark as a beautiful city and a powerful state. And I just want to thank all of you who took the time to be here. So my spirit feels full. My heart feels full. I feel like I'm grateful that it's an intimate conversation, because I'm hoping that we can be intimate with each other. So I come into this space today with a heart full of gratitude. I come into this space today feeling healed. Every opportunity I get to read from the book, to reflect on questions, it does something to my spirit. And each day I feel healed. And I want to say this to you before I begin to read is, it's very significant for me to be doing this with Newark Public Library. And although we're on Zoom, in my mind, I'm in Newark, like I'm physically there in that beautiful space. Because one of the folks that I loved dearly in the book, and all the names of the men or pseudonyms, is Tyrone. And Tyrone currently lives in Newark. And so there's a lot of emotions, clearly, right? It's kind of like bringing back, I can see myself on the New Jersey Transit. I see myself standing by the station. I see myself in his arms. I see myself, all of these emotions. And that relationship is no longer. So I also have to deal with that. So this is another opportunity for me to come full circle for healing. So I want to thank you for that. And that's it. I wanted to just share a couple of poems, those that, all of the poems touch me deeply, but these are some that people have written. And I want to say that since the book came out in March, and I'm grateful because it's a very tiny publisher, and I specifically chose a publisher of all women. David Lennington is the only voice outside of the lovers in the book that is the male voice. That was deliberate. At one point, David, you don't know this, but I was considering your voice, your afterword, being the opening of the book. But I wanted the reader to go straight, number one, to my voice, because there's the voices of so many men, but it's sort of coming through my mouth. And I wanted that, I know the story. And so your writing is so beautiful, but that's why it's an afterword and not a foreword. And so I want to read a few poems, Tea with God, Permission, The Bronx, circa 1983, and Compassion and Distance. And I chose these 4 poems. 2 of them in particular were ones that people have emailed me over and over to talk about how they felt healed. And I also wanted to go into the other sections of the book, because the book is in 6 chapters, each chapter dedicated to one lover. And then the 7th chapter is still about love, but it's about my love for justice, my love for the community I was raised in, my love for love. So I wanted to read a poem from that section. And within other poems, there's a poem called Vipassana Poems, a section. And I wanted to read one of the Vipassana poems. And quite quickly, I went into 10 days of noble silence back in 2018. And I think that that really changed so much about me and my life and how I see things. And when I came out of noble silence, because literally there were no pens, no cell phones, no telephones, no eye contact. You were here in a space with 200 people, maybe 400 people, 200 women, 200 men. We were separated, but you were not allowed to make eye contact. And the only time you were allowed, right, to speak to someone would be to a teacher. And I'm going to be vulnerable with y'all that right around day 7, I had a Vipassana experience, and I went to talk to a teacher because I began having dreams with the dead. I began having dreams with my father, like he was sitting right on my bed, and others who had passed before me. And the teacher said, just observe. Just observe. Don't make anything from it, just observe. And as I was going further and further into the meditation experience, it took me 3 days to just be quiet in my own head. It took me 6 days to sit still for about 5 minutes. By the time I left, I was able to sit still about 5 hours straight, and I was meditating in chunks up to 14 hours a day.
Wow.
When I came out of that meditation practice and got my hands on a piece of paper, it's like old emails, a piece of paper I was writing in the corner, and I got a pen. I wrote 40 poems, and 30, I think 2 of those are the Vipassana poems that are in the book. The other ones were so personal that not even I can read them without crying. So I'm going to start with Tea with God, and that comes from the Zarin section on page 75. Zarin is a police officer in Boston, and he's no longer speaking to me either. You know, right? So he sent an email, you know, with all this stuff going on with Black Lives Matter and the slaying and the killing of Black male and female and, you know, children, their bodies. That was part of why we could never survive as a relationship, because although he clearly is a Black man in blue, for me, I feel like the profession had changed something in his heart towards his own people. And we just spent a lot of time going at each other. So he sends me videos, I sent him videos. I just sent him a Black Lives Matter video noting the very few convictions, I think 9 of the 1,048 Black people who were killed in the last couple of years. And he just got upset with me. And so that's where we are right now. So Tea with God is on page 75. And I want to say that at the beginning of every section is an epigraph. And the epigraph for Zarin, I want to thank Bob Marley for it. The epigraph for Zarin says, "The biggest coward of a man is to awaken the love of a woman without the intention of loving her." And these epigraphs really summarize my experience with the lover by the time I wrote the book, or wrote the specific poems. Tea with God. It's a little long, but let's see if we can get through it. I learned early on in my spiritual life never to question God. But lately, I felt the impulse to sit for tea with God and ask a few questions. Why on earth did you have me fall in love with a man who lives in a city I have always despised? A man whose career has only caused surges of hate within me. Why would you allow my heart to be unlocked by someone who on the surface doesn't seem to give a shit about being in a relationship with me? What is my lesson here? Is this a rhetorical exercise or a quest for me to find an answer to the perennial question elegantly and eloquently posed by the 1950s philosopher Frankie Lyman? Why do fools fall in love? I am a fool. I have allowed myself to slip heart first into a breathing space where I have not checked the air pressure or the quality. I am the fool who has allowed God to let my heart be open to words that I've longed to hear coming from the lips of someone whose reflection mirrors my own. I am the fool who has fallen for a person who understands the struggle in ways that I do and never can, and who can hold me closely and whisper, rant, rage against this machine that is a broken, beaten, battered falsity of a democratic nation, who can then release the pressure that is the work of our Blackness. Blackness matters to me in life and in love. My heart knew this long before my body did, yet this all along. My spiritual godparents, Jimmy, Malcolm, Tony, speak through me each time I write to and about the cop in Boston, who finds it challenging to communicate with me except when his body speaks to mine. In those moments, we share the same tongue, language, love, interlocking intimately, dizzying me, dazzling the spaces around us until we as one are the most captivating light show in the darkest parts of 2 a.m. When his body talks to mine, all the things that I hate the most about his profession and that city evaporate around us, hanging overhead, thickening the air as it mixes with his sweat, my hair. Today, reality has no bearing on the fact that I have never felt so alive than that moment in June when I looked into his eyes and saw a soul that reflects and intertwines with mine in search for love. Yes, God, we have a few things to talk about. Thank y'all. I can cut permission. It's a little long, Geraldine, so I can go straight to the Bronx, right? Newark, the Bronx.
Okay, we like the Bronx. We get each other.
The Bronx on page 145, the Bronx circa 1983. That's in other poems. I grew up in the South Bronx at a time when hip hop bursted onto the scene. I was fortunate. I grew up in a housing project where Adrian, one of the founding members of the Cold Crush Brothers, lived on the 12th floor. My family lived on the 5th floor. KRS-One gave jams across the bridge and Webster Avenue. Grandma Flash and the Five would frequent, they were like stars. They would kind of come through the neighborhood every now and then. We had what we called jams or block parties. Literally, I didn't understand it then, but when I grew up later and read a lot about hip hop and the power and the movement of hip hop, I remember seeing the electric cords, extension cords being hooked up to, the street lamps that were in our, like in the basketball court. So, you never really understand that you're part of history while you're making it, right? You just kind of wreck it afterwards. I also grew up at a time where the crack epidemic ravaged my community, where people were dying, just overdosing. And I could go into my elevator and there were vials of crack. And at my young age, I shouldn't have known this, but I knew the difference of price between the blue cover or the blue top or the red top or the yellow top. So I also grew up in that, right? But the Bronx, I am grateful to be from the Bronx, even though there were movies like Bonfire of the Vanities that presented us as though we were in a war zone. Jimmy Carter came to the Bronx and visited us when he was president in 1977. And the New York Post had this incredible picture on the front of, the abandoned buildings. But the story that is never told about the Bronx is that we did not burn down our own buildings. When the Bronx became more and more Black and Latinx, our Jewish and Italian brothers and sisters who were the landlords burned down the properties so they can gain the insurance money and move to another community. So 145, the Bronx, circa 1983. I am always thinking of that place, that hood that nurtured me and helped to shape me into the woman I am and becoming. I have always held you close, wrapped in my arms of blazing fire and ashes. I knew you before you knew yourself. I saved you when others wanted to throw you back to the ashes from which you rose. Like a phoenix, you came rising and rushing towards the midnight sky. And that is the story, not just of me, but so many others who have been raised in communities that have been purposely disenfranchised, communities that have been purposely underfunded, communities that have been forgotten. The Bronx is known as the forgotten borough. And it was designed that way. But still, as Sister Titi Maya Angelou says, still we rise, and still I rise, and still I rise. So I am going to read permission because the compassion is super short and permission kind of takes you back into this, kind of love zone. I'm getting excited over here, y'all, rereading these poems. Permission is on page 13. And this is from the Joseph section. I should tell you the epigraph for the other poems says, who experiences the vortex and lives to tell about it? The writer. And I quote myself there, because it's fun to quote yourself sometimes. This is from the Joseph section. Joseph was the TA in my class when I was a doctoral student at NYU. And Joseph named my daughter, and I named his daughter. So we have a very beautifully intimate, wonderful friendship. And if there were any of the six, I would say Joseph is probably the best match for me. He's a great cheerleader. He pushes gently. He would be just the best partner for me. He's smart, he's funny, he has dry humor. The only problem was Joseph was married, and so was I. And I knew, and I'll say this, it's called 13 Years of Admiration, because that's really what it was. We admired each other for 13 years. And yet we both knew that even having that type of emotion for someone else is still cheating, right? You don't have to necessarily sleep with someone. And some of these men, at least two of them, I did not. But there is the emotionality of it. And so it was a struggle because he added so much to my life. Permission. You. Yes, you excite me. Thoughts of you interrupt my day and send my mind on unscheduled vacations. It's quite a challenge, you should know, for me to continue with the mundane and the trivial when visions of you are the competition. You. Yes, you have given me reason to believe that a woman should be surprised by her emotions. You, yes, you have caused me to smile when nary a joke has been told, to lick my lips just at the thought of yours, to tilt my head and imagine a midnight sky that doesn't stain of loneliness. You, yes, you have awakened a mighty spirit in me, and you have done all of this without the slightest touch, and certainly no permission from me. Okay, Joseph, with your bad self.
Love that, love that.
The last poem is from the Vipassana section, and this was written with Tyrone in mind. And while there was great joy, I think when it's great joy, it's also great pain, you know, we're just on that scale of intensity. And Tyrone was the type of person just so joyous. He would call me in the morning, Yoli, 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 Yoli. Like, always take my name 3 or 4 times, Yoli, Yoli, Yoli. And that would just get me completely pumped up. And when we were together, it was joy. Pure joy. But Tyrone was just not ready because Tyrone has not done the self-work and the self-love that he needs. So when a love like mine comes along, he didn't quite know what to do with it. So we had a couple of ruptures over 3 years in our friendship. And this was after the first rupture. It was about 6 months long. So on page 163, and I want to give a nod to Nayera Waid, the sister who wrote Salt. So there are 2 poets who deeply influenced me in this work. That's Rupi Kaur. She just announced she has a new book coming out. And Nayera Waid. So specifically Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur and Nayera Waid's Salt. So Nayera really created this new type of genre where the poem is personified, it's speaking for itself, and then it gives its title or its name at the end of the poem. So the title appears at the bottom and not at the top. Here's my truth. From the very beginning, you knew you couldn't love me in the way that I deserve to be loved. My love opens all you seek to conceal. For safety, you run and hide. There is grace in not reaching out to me. There is generosity in your silence, compassion in distance. Thank y'all.
All right. Love, 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 love this, Yoli. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I'm dropping my phone over here, y'all.
All right, that's all right. So I had questions, but now I have more questions. And I want to give our participants a chance. I feel like I should give y'all a chance first, but I have questions and I don't want to monopolize the time. So if anyone has any like burning questions right now before I go into mine, because I want to be mindful, I'm going to let you go first. You can come off mute and I'll let you go first, and then I'll ask those that I've received. And this is a safe place.
Oh, yes. And I'm an open book.
We appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable and share your heart and your spirit here. So is there anybody who has any burning questions before I jump in?
Well, it's a question that I think perhaps I know the answer. It wouldn't be possible for you to read more of your poems, would it, today?
She can tell you where to get the book from. How about that?
It's just so rewarding here. I mean, I have my book, okay, but it's just so delightful to hear you read it. So I just had to throw that out.
In late November, I'm dropping an Audible album. And I want to tell you why it's called an album, because all of the poems are set to original sound and music. And I've commissioned, so I'm reading at the Schomburg next week, y'all, and I just got permission to play the song that I had commissioned. It's a theme song from the book. So the Audible album will open up with the song, and then since all of my poems have been read and set to original sound and music. Willie Mosquera is the producer, and then the bonus track is the beginning of, or is one of the poems from the next book called The Peace Chronicles, and I'm 40 poems in deep on the Peace Chronicles.
Wow.
Thank you for saying that. The Audible is coming, and there will be music and just sound that goes with it.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
When is that going to be released, Yoli?
November, yes. And actually, we're waiting for David. No pressure, David, but David's going to record the afterword in his own voice. Okay. And the producer is also going to record the about the book and about the author. So there's just 2 more voices to come, and we have everything.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Looking forward. So before we wrap, I'll definitely make sure we take time to either put it in the chat or make sure that we all know how to find it, as well as the information about the Schomburg. But before we get into it, I want to, there's some people on the call who may not have been around for the very beginning, and I can't help but recognize the depth of your willingness to love, willingness to experience. And I have to call out that so many humans, specifically Black men, Black women, so many of us have challenges with going deep like that. So can you help us, one, understand what is love from the vortex, first of all? What is that as a concept? Because I think there's a number of us who want to get to that place, you know, a more substantive place. But before we even get there, I think just understanding and defining it will kind of get us started in the right place.
Thank you, sister, for that question. Well, I want to say that the book and the concept are intertwined, right? So on the surface, it is a book of my journey to self-love through experiences with 6 lovers over 3 decades, right? So I have a tagline, what is it? 6 lovers, 3 decades, 1 woman, right? But it's also a manifestation. The book is a manifestation of my journey. So when I say I write to free and heal myself, as I was writing the poems, I was trying to understand what I was going through in this journey to self-love, particularly with these lovers. And I always refer to this as, you know, I'm playing with this theory in my academic life called the archaeology of the self. And I have to say that I look at love from the vortex. So number one, the vortex was an experience for me of intense learning of the self, intense learning of who am I? I mean, who am I really? How do I love? How do I wish to be loved? How do I tell somebody that they should love me this way? And how do I then give them space to rise to that, right? So that's kind of the vortex, but I also refer to it as this archaeological dig that I experienced around love. And I look at the book as an artifact. So to take that metaphor of, you know, archaeology and digging deep, towards my journey of self-love, or on my journey of self-love, around what does it mean for me to love and be a lover? How do I wish to be loved in return? This book wrote itself. So in effect, it became this artifact of that journey towards self-love. Yeah. So that's Love from the Vortex, both as the concept and the actual book. Does that answer the question?
It does, at least for me. Beautiful. I have a follow-up to that. Initially, I was going to ask, like, how do we get to that place? But I want to know the answer to that from your perspective, but I also want to know more about this noble silence, because as women, wives, mothers, professionals, entrepreneurs, all of these things that we are, and these titles that we have, and these responsibilities that we prioritize, I think there's a number of us who haven't either found the time, made the time rather, or even dove deeply enough to understand like this very crucially important thing to our being. Yeah. So if you can just take some time and tell us more about noble silence, like what is that? What is the intent? How do you even do it? Because that sounds good, but some of us can't sit still for 3 seconds, you know? So that, as well as how do we get to this place? How would you just encourage us or instruct us?
The beauty of your questions is that they're both so wonderfully interconnected and related and connected. And, you know, it's a powerful question because, you know, this coming to self-love, this coming to this moment, is going to be different for each of us, right? And I think we inherently know that, but sometimes we have to say that. We have to, when we say that, we're recognizing, I think, our own limitations. I think we're recognizing our own openness. And because I am a very patient person, and the case with me, I'm sometimes very slow on the take to when I need to set up boundaries, or when I need to maybe walk away from someone. I'm super patient. And so I always give people, my children, my family members, my lovers included. I will even say about Angel, I was married to Angel for 26 years. By year 11, everyone, I knew that something had changed, and I probably should have gone or left or opened up the beginning of leaving. So that I waited another, what's that, another 13 years, over a decade? So that's my level of patience. So I just want to say that I'm extremely patient, and it serves me well in education. So I'm grateful for that. But at the same time, what's happening is that I'm opening myself up, that sometimes those experiences are buried deep. And it's only through that self-excavation that I realize, okay, I need to set a boundary right here. Because there's a lot of intense emotionality that goes into it. It's not just the physical and all of that, it's the emotions that we're investing. So it's going to be different for all of us to know our boundaries, to say, okay, I am giving this love in this way, but it's not being reciprocated. I need to disconnect that. So that's going to be different for all of us. In terms of the noble silence and being a mother and at the time an untenured professor, traveling around the country, trying to publish, doing all of this, I want to say that I waited 7 years to do it. My dear friend, I call her my sister, Dr. Lalitha Vasudevan, mentioned that she went to this place called Vapasana. I said, wow, tell me more about that. And she told me about it. I said, I don't think I can sit still for 2 minutes. I can't believe that you did this for 10 days. But at the same time, I was thinking, this is something I need. Yeah. My mom's been living with me for 20 years. And after the divorce, I now live with my mom and my daughter. My daughter was 7 at the time, and I just left my husband. And by the way, my husband and I were ex-husband. We're very close, really good friends. But I waited because I didn't feel that it was right to leave my 7-year-old daughter after her parents had just separated and go off on a 10-day retreat. So I waited 7 years. And the 7 years, in those 7 years, I did not date anyone. I was very focused on taking care of my mother, very focused on my daughter, and knew that she was at a point that I could go on this retreat. And part of also what pushed the retreat, that there was so much pressure coming at me. I remember saying to my mother in January, I guess this was 2018, I said, if I don't do something, I'm going to unravel. She said, child, please don't unravel. So I had tried the year before self-imposed meditation. I would go away for 3 days, a weekend, and I would shut off the phone. I would not write. I would do nothing. So I was beginning to build up that type of, I don't know, I guess threshold to be able to do this. And finally, when the time came, I needed it. So I applied in January and went in June. It's Vipassana Meditation Center. It's the largest meditation center, Vipassana Meditation Center outside of India, that was built in the 1970s by kind of a hippie-like community who had gone over to India, studied with Goenka, and came back and said, we need to have this here. And I can talk more about that, but I will recommend this film. It's on YouTube. It's called Doing Time, Doing Vipassana. And again, Lalita Vasudevan in her beauty introduced me to this. And you see the impact of Vipassana meditation on so-called inmates and so-called correction guards at one of the largest, most notorious prisons in India. And so before I went into Vipassana, I looked at the film, I did some reading, and right before, 6 weeks before, I kept a journal of silence because I was preparing myself. I knew I wanted to do work around my mother and daughter, my relationship. I knew I wanted to do work around Tyrone because we had had that rupture. And I wanted to do work around my father and things that were sitting with me. And so to answer your question, I want to say, whether it's 10 days of noble silence or a weekend, we must find the time to sit in silence. And sometimes it's scary because in silence, you come face to face with yourself. And a lot of us, we're easier to forgive others and less forgiving of ourselves. And then it becomes a moment that you're beating yourself up. I should have done this. I shouldn't have done that. That's going to happen naturally, but you need to get past that. And I feel you need to be in fellowship with yourself, not have the children pulling at you, your partner, even your best friends. If for those of us who are unpartnered, you have to sit still to know what you need to work on. That's what it was for me. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is. It is powerful and necessary. And I think we just all have to be reminded that we deserve and need that time.
Yes, deserve it. That you just said it. We deserve it. And no one's going to give it to you. I'm telling you, not even your partner who may love you or your best friend or your kids, you know, because they need you too. They need your energy. They need what you give them. They're not to say, mommy, please go away for 10 days.
Certainly not. Yeah, certainly not. You know what, Yoli, let's dive deeper into that, because I just heard you say something that stood out about your partner's not going to give it to you even though they love you. And earlier, which poem was it? You spoke about how you want to be loved and communicating how you want to be loved. Okay, I shouldn't ask more than one question at once, but I have more than one. So I want to hear more about communicating how you want to be loved, but also, and I think the poem about Zarin, the quote, I wrote it down, was that he had trouble communicating with you until his body spoke to yours. As well as, I think this was Tyrone, where you said that you open all that he sought to conceal.
Yes.
So I want to just have you share a bit more about communicating within relationships, and ultimately being able to get or inspire what you want and need.
Can I say that these questions are fire? Oh my God.
I hope it's helping somebody. It's helping me.
Well, the first thing I want to say is before we can even get to, for me, the point of communicating what I want, which I do want to tell you, I'm kind of practicing that now with someone, that you have to know yourself. And I'm not just saying that as a cliche, like you really have to do that deep work to know yourself, to know what you want.
Yeah.
And tell me the other part of the question, sis. So that's the precursor. That's like you know how you have a prerequisite? That's like the first course.
Yeah, yeah. So the other part was communicating. So there was, I think it was Zarin who had trouble communicating with you until his body spoke to yours. Yes. So how do we make sure, basically, how do we get our mates to communicate with us? And how do we effectively communicate with them? And not just when their bodies are looking to communicate with ours.
And so you have to know how they communicate. One thing that the vortex, and I want to say in this case, Vapasana really helped me in sitting still. It helped me to observe with more than someone else. And so I got to, and no way am I claiming to be a clinician by any means, but I got to really listen and watch and ask certain questions that helped me get to know that partner really, really deeply, and to learn how that partner communicated. And for Zarin, and being a cop, it was just a lot of, it was always like aggressiveness, power, and his most gentle moments was when his body spoke to mine. He almost couldn't articulate loving responses. And I think as I've come to understand that, is that vulnerability is not what he felt he should be showing as a police officer. Because you can't go, you're going into a domestic violence situation, you're going into a situation where someone has a gun, you're going into a situation that might be you or it might be them. There's no room for vulnerability. Yeah. So he was not able, because of the lack of self-work that he was doing, he wasn't able to kind of shut that off, if you will, right? So he was always aggressive. I would say things like, you know, all I want is peace. And he would say to me, why have peace when you can have war? And he believed it. Like this, it was like, if we weren't like at each other, we weren't communicating. So his communication pattern was aggressiveness. Mine was peace, stillness. And I noticed the longer that I went on with him, he kind of brought that out in me, because he would say things that would make the Yoli from the Bronx pop off. And I'm, you know what? I've been working on not popping off, and I'm not gonna have you have me popping off. Yeah. So it didn't work. Our communication skills just didn't work until, or only when, it was permissive in his mind to be gentle. And he connected that, as most men do, not all, and some women, not all, connected that to sex, connected that to making love to someone. That's when it was permissible to be gentle, to be soft. And because I like peace and I like softness, that's why it spoke to me. But you can't be in bed 24 hours a day. You can't be in that space all the time. And so we just were not compatible in terms of something as simple as our communication. The closest thing we had was music. We loved music across the span of the decades, from the Ink Spots to Motown, the Isley Brothers. And so another way we communicated was through song. And we were fine when we were passing songs with each other. We were speaking that same language. But, you know, when it came to having a conversation, So that's just one example. And I think for me, because I'm open, I remain open to the lover before me. In some ways, I adapted to each of them. So Angel communicated in a different way. I would have to say Salvador and Joseph, they were high-level communicators. And it was no surprise that they had been in years of therapy. And through therapy, they found their voice and they talked about what they wanted. So I think I had the most, not just intellectually, exciting conversations with Salvador and Joseph. One had a PhD, one is a massage therapist. So it has nothing to do with like formal education, because Salvador and I can go down deep, deep, deep. He's the one that pulled me into the vortex. So we would go on trips with these conversations because he was so in tune with his emotions. He wasn't afraid to cry in front of me. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Mm. And can I say one last thing about Salvador? When he got the book, he sent me a text, and he opened up the page and he took a picture, and he said, I remember those days and those conversations where it felt that I was spinning in a galaxy, and when I landed, the safest place was your bed.
Mm. Mm.
And that's not just like making a connection to sex. We would sometimes sit on the edge of his bed and my bed and talk until the sun came up.
Wow.
Just beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
I don't know if I answered the question, but I thank you for it.
Yeah, you did. You did. I appreciate it. And so I want to be true to, who is it, Fidelia, and give you an opportunity to close with another and share information on how we can find you. But I have one other question that came through kind of anonymously, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask it. There's someone who wants to know, and it makes me think of it, I think it was Jacob, the TA, when you were in your doctoral program. Can you love more than one person at once? And how? If so, how? And what does it mean?
Wow. I want to tell you, I want to say that.
And I know I threw that in the last minute, but we want to know what you think.
Libra, and I love hard. Like, you have all of me. When I say all of me, of course I keep stuff for myself, but like when we're in this, like we're in it. Mm-hmm. And that was part of the reason why I couldn't work with Joseph, because I was married, he was married. Mm-hmm. We loved other people. Mm-hmm. I think people are, I want to say this, I don't think one person can give you everything you need. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that it's fair that we look to one partner. In my case, my girlfriends fulfill things that a romantic partner can't. There's certain things I get from family members that a girlfriend can't. So, I mean, we're so nuanced. I don't think one person can ever give you what you need. And I think that's where a lot of relationships fall apart, because we expect that one partner to fulfill all of our desires, all of our needs. We're limited human beings. Yeah. So, you know, that's the first thing. I personally cannot date. Part of it is Christian principles, and we can get into that another time about like not sleeping with someone and all of that, and the stuff that I had to work through growing up very deeply in the church and believing very much still in God, yet understanding a lot of restrictions, particularly for women and their bodies and how we share our bodies that were, you know, pronounced in the church. And it could be religious reasons why I cannot date more than one person. So I think it's both my personality, it's probably deep religious beliefs as well. I know that there are folks who can date 3 and 4 people. In fact, people say you should date each of them and see who rises to the top. Because I know how deeply I love, I cannot do that. But I'm sure that other people can. And that takes a lot of strength. And you have to really know yourself. Because when you are intimately involved with multiple people, who's showing up? Are you the same person with all people? Because I know that I adapt to the lover. So that's a different part of me that emerges. So am I emerging with 3, 4 lovers at the same time? I don't think that I could handle that. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Looks like, yeah, there's some folks in agreement. So yeah. Very good. Well, we appreciate it. And if you wish, is there anyone else? I know you all were listening, and I see lots and lots of comments over here on in the chat. Was there any other question? It looks like a couple folks have come off silence. I'm gonna come off of mute, so I'll give you a chance to ask any last questions.
So I did have a question. How did you begin the journey for self-awareness and identifying your needs? How did that start with that?
Okay, I think I heard you say, how did I begin the journey of like self-love, self-worth? It probably started as a child. And I want to say that like growing up with my mom and dad and my sisters and brothers. My dad, you know, came from the island of Barbados, and very brilliant man, was a pharmacist on the island of Barbados, came here and couldn't get work. Not unlike many brilliant Black men. And so as a result, he was a numbers runner. He worked in a dry cleaners. He worked in liquor stores. He did a lot of odd jobs. And that made him angry. And that anger he often took out on my mother and sometimes on us. And so I think that my self-love was probably compromised as a child. And it was through poetry. I started writing at 15 that allowed me to have a different kind of reality and to actually, I used to write love poems to myself. And it wasn't that my parents didn't love me. I mean, I come up with the generation where they didn't say I love you. They're like, I'm putting food in your mouth and you've got a roof over your head. I don't need to tell you I love you. Mm. But sometimes we need to hear it, right? Yeah. And so I said it to myself and I would say it in my poetry. So I do believe that that was the quest. And then as I became married and had all of these experiences with these men, and I want to tell you, sis, up until I would say with Tyrone, who was the last lover in the book, I was still learning about self-worth. And I want to be I'm happy to say this to you now, as I'm beginning to not really talk to someone. I don't even put labels on it, but we were having a conversation the other night and I heard myself and I'm like, Yoli, I'm so proud of you. Because I was direct, I was loving, but I was very clear. No, you're in the presence of a queen. And unless you can come correct, you really won't have any more time with me. And I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Right?
Hello.
Sis, and it never ends. Because as soon as we think we've gotten there, listen, God will put somebody in your life that will just shake all of that. So I always rely on God and I'm in tune with myself. And I know that I'm a work in progress still. But I do love me and I know that I'm worthy.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Latasha, we have to hear from you as well. Are you there?
Yes, I was wondering, because I followed you as an academic first, how does this artwork, and I'm an artist as well, how does it intersect, and do you think you'll do more autoethnography?
Oh, sis, that's a beautiful question. Yeah, I find that I still have more poems to write, and I will tell you the Peace Chronicles is documenting the peace that I have found coming out of the vortex. I will tell you there's still a chapter that's dedicated to Tyrone, and it kind of has his real last name in it, so I have to be careful with that, and I'm playing around with this word meta, which comes out of meditation, right? And it's very close to the spelling of his last name. And then there's a section on my father, because there are things that I've needed to reconcile about that. And then there's just another general section on love. And that's my scholarship, and particularly with archaeology of the self and the racial literacy development model I'm working on, the base of that model is love. And so I'm talking about love for students that we're teaching, love for the self. So it's not bifurcated. This is like who I am. And I'm also writing academic articles. I'm working on an academic book. And this is part of my scholarship. And I think we have to do that kind of work, sis, to let the Academy know that this is one person showing up. I'm not gonna pretend, I'm not gonna ignore this part of myself, right? Just to do these academic articles, which sometimes they can be beautiful, but for the most part, they're very dry. So I'm trying to bring all of me. And that's why sometimes you'll see poetry show up in my academic articles, which is one that I just published something with Sister Gwen Baxley for the Brooklyn Rail. If y'all can get your hands on that, it's also online. And we wrote, poetic pandemics and talking about anti-Blackness and looking at the Black radical tradition of poets like Nikki Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, Audre Lorde, these poets who wrote for their time, right, signifying on what was going wrong in society. So Gwen and I take up that Black radical tradition and we write about these police killings. And so that's poetry, and that's also the theory and the academic work. So it's a blended, this is who I am. This is who you are. That's how we change the Academy.
The title again?
Oh, it's Brooklyn Rail, you can go to their Instagram page, and the issue is curated by Dr. Elizabeth Bishop. And the title of the piece Gwen and I wrote is something like Pandemic Poetry, Poetics in the Pandemic, something anti-Blackness, and the Black radical tradition. And we just did a longer piece that's coming out in Research in Teacher Education. Is coming out next year, where we go deeper into the Black radical tradition and specifically the use of poetry in classrooms and what that does for children and what that does for teachers.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yoli, to that point, just knowing the depth of conversations that people who care so much may ask, and talking about Black radical traditions and poetry, what are your thoughts on dating someone with a different or lower level of racial consciousness?
That's gonna be hard, y'all. And I can turn to Angel. Angel is Puerto Rican, grew up on the Lower East Side, very fair-skinned. So a lot of why I hate Boston is when Angel and I visited Boston in the 80s and 90s. On surface, Angel looks like a white dude until he opens up his mouth and you know that his last name is Ruiz. And the looks that we got in Boston, things that people said to us, was unconscionable. And here we are, two young people in love. Not that we weren't aware of the racism, but I mean, hell, okay, but I love you, boo, and you love me. That's what it was about. But yet the outside world just couldn't get its head wrapped around the fact that we could look different, or even if Angel were white, that we could be in love. So that impacted our relationship a lot. Angel, I remember one day him saying to me, because I used to take Olivia to Al Sharpton would have his thing in Harlem. I forget, it was burned down after a while. But anyway, we would go Saturdays. My mom would go, I would take Olivia. I have pictures of Olivia in the carriage at police protests. And I remember Angel saying to me one day, everything is not about race. Until he had an interaction with the police. Consciousness. He sends me stuff at 2, 3 in the morning, sending me stuff about the elite and blue bloods. And I mean, he's going deep in this thing. And he's out there in Zuccotti Park, down with the 1%, even when I wasn't. And so he came a little bit later, and that also helped we were already separated, but that helped our friendship. I will say this, where I am at this point in my life, I don't need to tutor anyone. If I'm going to be with someone, and even if, let's say they are of a different so-called race, we know all this mess is constructed. They have to have a consciousness. I can't explain to them the 400-year dehumanization project of Black people in this. They have to know it. They have to have some understanding, and they have to, for me, they have to have some role in the fight for equity and liberation. This is just where I am at this time in my life.
Love it.
Does that make sense?
A whole lot. A whole lot. We're getting so much love on the line for you. People are sending texts and in the chat that they are loving you, Yoli. So thank you. Thank you.
Onions in here. Hey, boo.
I know, it's so sweet. No, it's real though. This conversation is so real and so needed. Before we have you share more on upcoming events and how they can get in touch with you and get books and all that, are there any last questions from the attendees?
Well, I did have that burning desire to know, and someone started answering. Thank you so much, because when hip hop started, historically, breakdancing is only documented. But when I hear the songs, I hear shake, shake it, and I just feel like that's going to be part of my discovery. But I'm like, you were there, right, when everything was up in the sky. So I just wonder, like, what dances were the women doing when when hip hop started?
Oh my gosh.
You have to show us.
I got to remember that birthday coming up in October, and I am getting up there. What were we doing? We were doing the snake.
Okay, see?
Listen, I was trying to be a B girl. I had no rhythm, y'all.
Oh, so there's hope.
We had cardboard and linoleum in the driveway. Watch Wild Style in the old hip hop videos.
Oh, wow.
I watched it.
Date that Angel and I went on was Wild Style. So hip hop was all in my life. Angel was a tagger. His tag name was Hawk. So he used to like go to the trains and do Hawk and Lala. I mean, we were there and we were doing it. But the WAP, we were doing the Smurf. Smurf, the WAP. I'm gonna have to go back. Smile.
It's funny.
That's right. I see you. I see you.
I love it.
Elena. So yeah, I do have something I wanted to share. And people often ask me this, and I think we might have even been thinking about this. How do I continue to love, right? Like when you've been hurt, and believe me, there's joy and there's pain. It's not just all hurt. And there's a risk we take. Anytime you're gonna open up your heart to love, there's the risk that you will be hurt because people have the right to walk away, right? They have the right to leave no matter how good you are to them. If they're not in the space that they can accept the love that you have to give, they're gonna do what they feel is best for them. And sometimes that means running away. Sometimes that means rejecting it, whatever it is, depending on where they are. But I wanted to answer that question with a short excerpt from one of the poems in terms of how do I continue to love? And why do I continue to love when I have experienced, and I will love again. I want to tell you, I believe that. I totally believe that I am going to love again. But there's this poem called A Goodbye in the Making. And I just want to read a short piece of that. A Goodbye in the Making is from the Tyrone section. And it's on page 135. So this is how I answered that question about how do you continue to love when you've been hurt. Today I questioned why I opened my heart to you and continued to believe in love. The answer is one that I know. I have to love. I want to love. I love amidst the pain because the pain liberates me, reminds me of my will to survive. Love cradles me, a newborn, still exploring her heart's surroundings, crawling low, aiming high, wanting to be held and caressed. That was kind of a nod to Michelle Obama, like when she said, when they go low, we go high. So I was writing that poem at that time and Michelle's voice, Miss Obama's voice was in my head, but I love because I have to love, even amidst the pain. Love can be so beautiful and joyful. I think about the love I have with my friend, specifically, Melissa's someone I love deeply. I love David. I love my bestie, Godi Muhammad. I mean, like Brittany Cooper, who writes about that romantic sister love. I love love. So as long as I'm living, I'm going to be open to it because it gives me so much.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I don't think I'll ever give up on it.
I wish the same for every person on this call.
Me too. May love and peace surround you always. That's what I signed in the book. And by the way, I want to tell you about self-love. Speaking about signing books, this is my book to me. So what did I say? I said, to Yoli, with love, love yourself. Love is the answer. So I write love notes to myself. I signed the book to myself.
May I show mine? I don't know if you can see it.
Read it to us.
Okay. Fidelia, may peace and love surround you always.
Answer. Thank you for that, sis. That's how I signed, because that's my wish for anyone who touches this book. And I want to say this, I'm so blessed and happy because a group of high schoolers, 6 high schoolers, 1 undergrad from Clark, Atlanta, and a teacher who's been teaching for like 30 years, they're writing a curriculum for the book.
Oh, wow.
So we're having our second curriculum meeting next week. I cannot tell you how overjoyed I am to see young people from 9th grade to first year college talk to me about this book and why it should be in classrooms. And more schools are buying, the book. So, I want us to talk about love in the way we talk about bullying and all these other things that are, like, why not? Why can't we talk about love in that way?
Yeah, we need to. Well, Yoli, please, 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 you have to tell us how we can find more of you, how we can follow you, how we can see more of you, get these books, all of the above. Please share.
I'm excited. The most recent thing, or the next thing that's coming up, is next Saturday, y'all. I feel so grateful and blessed to be part of the Schaumburg, New York. So this is like Newark Public Library, now New York Public Library. I'm bi-coastal, y'all.
Love it.
The Schaumburg Literary Festival, I will be reading on Saturday, September 26th. I'm going to debut the song there, the song that was commissioned and written by 80s Babies. It's a rap song. Sis, right? Sister Latasha, no surprise there. You got to be true to yourself. It felt right to me. So I'll send the link, but you could also just do Schaumburg Literary Festival, and Eddie Glaude, Roxanne Gay, Mahogany Brown, like incredible people are there, and it's all free. You could also check out my website. I also curated 2 Spotify playlists that gave me respite as I was going through this. So there is a playlist called Yoli in the Vortex. That was for me. And then there's a playlist called Love from the Vortex. And these are the songs that the lovers and I would share. So everything from Patti LaBelle's Love, Need, and Want You, which is part of the Angels section, to the Isley Brothers, Floetry. I'm definitely. It goes all the way back. We've got I forget his name, who sold his soul to the devil. What's that? He went down. Oh my gosh. Anyway, he's on there too.
He went down to Georgia.
He went down to Georgia and sold his soul to the devil. Joseph loved blues music. He loved blues and he loved jazz. And he used to call me up on the phone and that song would be playing. Robert Johnson. So we got Robert Johnson, Isley Brothers. So check out my website. There's also merchandise, y'all. T-shirts like Melissa had on the other day that says "Talk Less, Love More."
What's your website, Yoli?
YolandaSeelyRuiz.com. Look, there's a T-shirt, y'all.
I love it.
The first poem that came out of Vipassana, but it was the last poem in the book. So all the stuff, it's like a story. Okay, so much happening. The Audible book in November, and I'm also working with someone to do a documentary because, I have a little show every Wednesday that's on IG and YouTube called Fall Into the Vortex with Yoli. And I've just been interviewing people about love. People who read the book. So Dr. Bettina Love and her partner, Chelsea Love. Tomorrow's episode are 2 educators who work for the Department of Education. Very powerful. It focuses a lot on Tyrone and about fathers who are not in our lives. Wow. So we never know. It's unscripted. You never know what happens when you fall into the vortex with Yoli.
Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, we are thrilled. Looks like Melissa just shared the link for the Schaumburg event next week, but you will see more of us because we want to see more of you and hear more of you as well. But we just thank you on behalf of the Newark Public Library, hopefully, or the Newark Public Library and specifically our president's coterie.
Yes.
And wish you well. Love and peace.
Thank you. Love and peace.
On this call as well. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a beautiful night.
Bye. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining.
And don't forget the movie.
Oh.
Before everybody else goes, the movie.
Well, I just think that a movie's coming.
Oh, see, I'm writing it down. I'm ready to go see it.
Sis, tell you, I've texted Spike 3 times now. Now, you know I had Spike at Teachers College. And here's the other thing. I was on this thing with my bestie over the summer, and Kenny Lattimore showed up. And he has this whole, you know, like never too busy for you, babe.
Uh-huh.
He has a whole like production company. So I sent a copy to him and his wife and his best friend. I continue to put it out into the world. And if it is meant, it will happen. Someone told me the other day, she's a dancer. She said, I look at this and I think about Ntozake Shange's for colored.
Exactly.
These poems should be set to dance. So thank you for putting that out into the world. Anything is possible. And I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Love it. We will be there.
Anything and everything's possible.
Thank you, all of you. I send you so much love and so much peace. Thank you, Sister Baraka. Thank you, Lauren, Jared, all of you, the President's Circle of Newark, for hosting me and believing in me. I am grateful.
That's our way. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night.
Thank you all. Bye.